Commander Hyuk stood on the bridge of the Void Talon, watching the alien world grow larger on the main screen. The planet looked like a giant rock covered in metal cities. Sharp towers reached up into the red sky like metal claws. This was the home of the Kthvar, and today would decide if humans and aliens could work together or fight alone against a terrible enemy. "Sir, we're getting their signal," said Communications Officer Yoonji from her station. "They want us to land at the main military base." Hyuk nodded. He had read all the reports about the Kthvar. They were warriors who lived only for battle. They were tall, strong, and covered in thick scales like armor. Most important of all, they never showed any feelings. To them, emotions were weakness. "Dr. Minji, are you ready?" Hyuk asked, turning to the woman standing beside him. Dr. Minji checked her datapad one more time. She was the ship's expert on alien cultures and biology. Her job was to help the humans understand how to talk to the Kthvar without making them angry. "As ready as anyone can be for meeting a species that thinks feelings are dangerous," she said. Hyuk smiled a little at her joke. It was a small smile, but warm. Minji smiled back, and for just a moment her hand touched his arm. It was such a quick touch that most people would miss it, but they were not alone on the bridge. At the back of the bridge stood 3 Kthvar observers. They had come aboard when the human ship first entered Kthvar space. They were supposed to watch and learn about humans before the big meeting. The largest Kthvar was War Prime Vex. He was nearly 8 feet tall and covered in dark green scales. His eyes were like yellow glass, cold and always watching. Next to him stood Scout Blade Thok, younger and smaller but still much bigger than any human. The third alien, Tech Claw Riss, kept checking a small device that recorded everything. "Wendy Dean." Minji touched Hyuk's arm. All 3 aliens became very still. Their heads tilted to one side like confused birds. War Prime Vex made a low sound in his throat that might have been surprise or disgust. "Humans display inefficient behavior," Vex said in his deep, rough voice. "Physical contact during duty serves no tactical purpose." "It's called being friendly," Minji said, turning to face the aliens. "Humans often touch each other to show care or support." "Care?" Scout Blade Thok stepped forward, his scales making soft scraping sounds. "You mean emotional attachment to another individual?" "Yes, exactly," Minji said. The 3 Kthvar looked at each other. Their faces showed no expression, but something passed between them. Tech Claw Riss made notes on his device very quickly. "This explains much about human weakness." "War Prime," Vex said, "Your species survived a death world, yet you allow emotions to control your actions." Hyuk felt his jaw tighten. He did not like being called weak, especially not in front of his crew. But he kept his voice calm. "Our emotions don't control us. They help us work better together." "Impossible," Vex said. "Emotions cloud judgment. They make warriors hesitate. They cause unnecessary risk-taking to protect others who should protect themselves." Before Hyuk could answer, the ship shook slightly as it entered the planet's atmosphere. "Landing in 5 minutes, sir," called pilot Jiho from the front of the bridge. "Thank you, Jiho," Hyuk said. "Everyone prepare for landing." As the crew worked, at their stations the Kthvar observers watched everything. They saw how Engineer Do-hyun and Medic Soman worked together, sharing information and tools without being asked. They saw how the humans looked out for each other, making sure everyone was ready and safe. Most of all, they watched Hyuk and Minji. The 2 humans moved around each other like dancers who knew each other's steps. When Minji needed to reach something, Hyuk was already moving out of her way. When Hyuk looked worried about something on his screen, Minji was there with the information he needed. "They fight together often?" Scout Blade Thok asked quietly. "Hyuk and Minji?" "They've been working together for 3 years, said Gunner Hana, who was walking past. "Best team on the ship." 3 years of partnership, Thok repeated like he was trying to understand a difficult math problem. The ship landed with a soft bump. Through the windows they could see the Kthvar military base. It was all straight lines and sharp angles, built from black metal and gray stone. Hundreds of Yao. Kthvar warriors moved in perfect formation across the landing field. They looked like a machine made of living parts. Remember, Hyuk said to his team, we need this alliance. The Void Plague is spreading fast and we can't fight it alone. The Kthvar are strong fighters. If we can work together, we might have a chance. And if we can't? Asked Medic Soman. Then both our species will probably die, Minji said simply. War Prime Vex made that low throat sound again. Your species speaks of death so easily, yet you waste time with these touching behaviors and emotional displays. Maybe, Hyuk said, standing up from his captain's chair. You'll understand us better after spending more time with us. As the landing ramp opened, hot air rushed into the ship. It smelled like metal and something sharp that made their noses burn. Outside, a group of Kthvar warriors waited in a perfect line. They all looked exactly the same, tall, strong, and completely emotionless. The human team walked down the ramp. As they stepped onto the alien world, Minji stumbled slightly on the metal surface. Without thinking, Hyuk's hand shot out to steady her. For just a second, his hand stayed on her back, making sure she was okay. Behind them, all three Kthvar observers stopped walking completely. They stared at this simple act like it was the most confusing thing they had ever seen. Why does the leader risk his own balance to prevent another's minor fall? Techclaw Riss whispered to Scout Blade Thok. Unknown, Thok whispered back. Human behavior patterns do not match Deathworld survivor profiles. War Prime Vex said nothing, but his yellow eyes never left the human team as they walked toward the waiting Kthvar delegation. Something about these strange aliens was bothering him, but he could not figure out what it was. The meeting that would decide the fate of two species was about to begin, but already the Kthvar were learning that humans were nothing like what they expected from a race of Deathworld survivors. The question was, would this difference save both species, or doom them all? The Kthvar training ground was a place of pure violence. Massive warriors threw each other across metal floors with sounds like thunder. Their claws left deep scratches in the walls. Some bled from fresh wounds, but none of them made any sound of pain. War Prime Vex walked beside the human delegation, showing them the pride of Kthvar military training. Here our warriors learn to ignore weakness, he said, his voice filled with satisfaction. Pain, fear, emotional attachment, all these things that make other species weak. Hyuk watched two Kthvar fighters slam into each other again and again. Neither one showed any sign of caring about the other's safety. When one fell and did not get up quickly enough, his partner simply found another opponent. The fallen warrior was left to heal alone. Efficient, Hyuk said carefully. But don't you ever help injured teammates? Help creates dependency, Vex replied. A warrior who cannot fight alone is useless to the clan. Dr. Minji watched a group of young Kthvar practice with real weapons. They moved like machines, perfect and deadly. But when one of them made a mistake and got a deep cut on his arm, the others just stepped around him. No one even looked to see if he was okay. That's harsh, she said quietly to Hyuk. Hyuk nodded. He started to put his hand on her shoulder, then remembered they were being watched. But Minji saw the movement and gave him a small smile that said she understood. Scout Blade Thok was watching them again. He had been doing that all morning, following the humans around with his yellow eyes fixed on every small interaction. Now he saw Hyuk stop himself from touching Minji, and saw how she smiled anyway. Question, Thok said suddenly. The female shows pleasure response even though the male did not complete the touching action. Why? Minji blinked in surprise. Because I knew he wanted to comfort me. Sometimes the thought is as important as the action. Thok tilted his head. So far to one side it looked like his neck might break. The thought of touching causes the same response as actual touching. Sometimes even better, Minji said with a small laugh. All three Kthvar observers made that low throat sound at the same time. Techclaw Riss wrote so fast on his device that his claws made scratching sounds. Impossible, War Prime Vex said, firmly. Thoughts cannot replace actions. Results come only from physical reality. Maybe for your species, Hayuk said. But humans are different. They moved to another area where Kthvar warriors were learning battle formations. Each fighter stood in his own space, never getting too close to the others. When they moved alone. When they fought practice enemies, each warrior worried only about his own survival. Perfect individual combat efficiency, Vex said proudly. Each warrior is a complete unit. No weak links, no dependencies. But what if one of them gets in trouble? Asked Engineer Do-hyun. What if they need backup? Then they die, Vex said simply, and the strong survive. Medic Soman made a small sound of distress. Do-hyun immediately stepped closer to her, not even thinking about it. His presence seemed to calm her down right away. There, Scout Blade Thok said, pointing at them with one clawed finger. Male moves closer to distressed female without being ordered. Female's stress indicators decrease immediately. How? Because she knows he cares about her, Gunner Hana said from where she was watching the alien training. It makes her feel safer. Feel safer. Thok repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. Feeling of safety from proximity of another individual. Right, Hana said. Haven't you ever felt better just because someone you trust was nearby? The three Kthvar looked at each other. Their faces showed nothing, but they were quiet for a long time. Kthvar do not trust, War Prime Vex said finally. Trust is vulnerability. Vulnerability leads to death. But trust also leads to teamwork, Hayuk said. And teamwork makes everyone stronger. Vex made a harsh sound that might have been laughter. Observe our strength, human leader. He gestured to the training warriors around them. We conquered 17 worlds with individual combat excellence. We need no teamwork. As if to prove his point, a group of Kthvar warriors began a demonstration. They attacked practice targets with incredible speed and power. Their claws tore through metal like paper. Their strength was amazing to watch. But Pilot Jiho noticed something. They're all doing the same thing, he said quietly to communication. Officer Yunji. Look, same attack pattern, same timing, same everything. Yunji nodded. Like a computer program. Very good at what they do, but not adaptable, Jiho finished. Scout Blade Thok heard them talking. You find weakness in our methods? Not weakness exactly, Jiho said carefully. Just sameness. What happens when you face an enemy that doesn't fight the way you expect? We adapt our individual techniques, Thok said, but he sounded less certain than before. Individually, yes, Yunji said. But what about adapting together? As a team? Thok had no answer for that. The tour continued for 2 hours. The humans saw incredible displays of Kthvar strength, speed, and fighting skill. But they also saw the complete absence of cooperation, emotional support, or mutual care. During a break, the human team gathered near their ship to drink water and rest. The hot air of the alien world made them tired quickly. As always, they automatically looked out for each other. Medic Somin checked that everyone was drinking enough water. Engineer Do-hyun found shade for the group. Pilot Jiho and Gunner Hana shared their energy bars with others who had forgotten to bring food. And Hyuk and Minji. They just seemed to move together like two parts of the same person. When she was tired, he found her a place to sit. When he was worried about something, she was ready with information or just a reassuring presence. The Kthvar observers watched all of this with growing confusion. They waste energy on unnecessary activities, War Prime Vex muttered. Do they? Scout Blade Thok asked quietly. Observe. The female medical expert ensures all individuals maintain proper hydration. The male technical expert locates optimal environmental conditions. These actions increase group survival probability. Tech Claw Riss looked up from his device. Group survival statistics for human crews are 37% higher than predicted for individual-based species. Impossible, Vex said again, but this time he sounded less sure. The demonstration that changed everything happened just before the tour ended. A young Kthvar warrior was practicing with a heavy weapon when something went wrong. The weapon exploded, sending metal pieces flying everywhere. The warrior fell, badly hurt. The other Kthvar warriors barely looked at him. They simply moved their practice to another area, leaving the injured warrior alone on the ground. But the humans all rushed toward the injured alien immediately. Medic Soman reached him first, her medical kit already in her hands. She began checking his wounds, while the others formed a protective circle around her. "Why do you help?" The injured warrior gasped, confused and in pain. "I am not your clan." "Because you're hurt," Soman said simply, working on his injuries. "That's enough." War Prime Vex watched this scene with something like shock. You risk exposure to danger for an alien individual. You waste medical supplies on a warrior not of your species. This serves no tactical advantage. "It serves every advantage," Hayek said firmly. "It shows who we are. It shows what we believe is right." As Medic Samin worked, Engineer Do-hyun held the alien warrior's hand, speaking quietly to keep him calm. The warrior stared at this human male, unable to understand why a stranger would offer comfort. Your species is broken," War Prime Vex said, but his voice was uncertain. "These behaviors should have killed you long ago." Dr. Minji looked up at the towering alien leader. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe they're the reason we survived when so many other species didn't." For the first time since the humans had arrived, War Prime Vex had no answer. He stared at the scene of humans caring for an injured enemy, and something deep in his warrior mind began to crack. The injured Kthvar would live, but the certainty that emotions were weakness was starting to die. The emergency alarm screamed across both ships like a wounded animal. Red lights flashed in the darkness of space as urgent messages came through the communication systems. Multiple distress signals from the Kohler system, communication officer Yoonji announced, her voice tight with worry. 3 planets under attack by the Void Plague. Commander Hyuk felt his stomach drop. The Void Plague was the reason humans and Kthvar were trying to work together. The alien swarm consumed everything. In its path, planets, ships, entire species. Nothing could stop them alone. "How long until they reach the populated worlds?" he asked. 18 hours, maybe less, Dr. Minji said, checking her calculations twice. "Millions of people will die if we don't help." War Prime Vex stood on the bridge of his own ship, visible on the main screen. Behind him, his crew moved with mechanical precision, preparing for battle. "Human Commander," Vex said, "this is an opportunity to observe true Kthvar combat efficiency. We will handle this threat." "We're coming with you," Hyuk said immediately. "Our ships can help." "Unnecessary. Kthvar warriors require no assistance." "Maybe not," Hyuk replied, "but those people down there need every chance we can give them." Vex made his throat sound of disapproval, but he did not refuse the help. Both fleets jumped to hyperspace together. During the long journey, Scout Blade Thok came aboard the human ship to coordinate battle plans. He found the humans doing something he had never seen before. They were sitting together in the ship's common area, just talking. Not about tactics or weapons or battle strategies. They were talking about small things, memories of home, jokes, stories about friends and family. Pilot Jiho was showing pictures of his sister's new baby. Gunner Hana was laughing about something funny her mother had said in a letter. "Pre-battle behavior is inefficient," Thok said to Dr. Minji. "Why do they waste energy on meaningless conversation?" Minji smiled. "It's not meaningless. It reminds them what they're fighting for. It helps them stay calm and focused." "Fighting for survival requires no reminder," Thok said, confused. "We're not just fighting for survival," Engineer Do-hyun said from across the room. "We're fighting for each other, for the people back home, for the chance to keep having conversations like this one." Thok watched as Medic Soman moved around the room, quietly checking on everyone. She made sure Jiho had enough medicine for his old injury. She reminded Hana to eat something before the battle. She touched Do-hyun's shoulder gently when she saw him looking worried. The female medical expert shows care behavior for all individuals, Thok observed. But this creates emotional attachment. Emotional attachment causes hesitation in battle. Does it? Commander Hyuk asked, entering the common area. Or does it give people a reason to fight harder? Before Thok could answer, they dropped out of hyperspace. The Kolar system spread out before them, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. The void plague looked like a living darkness that ate light itself. Millions of small creatures moved together like a single massive organism, covering 2 planets completely. The third planet was still fighting, but its defenses were failing fast. Kthvar fleet will attack the main swarm, War Prime Vex announced, over the communication channel. Human ships will remain at safe distance and observe. Like hell we will, Hyuk said quietly, then switched on his communicator. Human fleet is moving to protect the evacuation ships around the third planet. Humans will be destroyed, Vex warned. Your ships are too small, your weapons too weak. Maybe, Hyuk said. But we're going anyway. The battle began like nothing any of them had ever seen. The Kthvar fleet moved with perfect coordination, each ship fighting alone but in formation. Their weapons were incredibly powerful, tearing huge holes in the void plague swarm. Individual Kthvar fighters flew with amazing skill. Each pilot focused only on his own survival and kill count. But the void plague was endless. For every creature the Kthvar destroyed, 10 more took its place. And when a Kthvar fighter got in trouble, no one came to help. Each warrior fought alone and died alone. The human fleet was smaller, and their weapons were weaker. But they fought completely differently. When pilot Jiho's ship lost power to its weapons, Gunner Hana immediately moved her ship to cover him, while engineer Do-hyun worked to get his systems back online. When a group of void plague creatures surrounded communication officer Yoonji's ship, 3 other human ships abandoned their own targets to rescue her. Scout Blade Thok watched this from the bridge of Hyuk's ship, his yellow eyes wide with confusion. Inefficient, he muttered. They abandoned tactical advantage to help individuals. Watch the results, not the methods, Dr. Minji said quietly. And the results were impossible to ignore. While the Kthvar were losing ships steadily, the human fleet was holding together. When someone was in trouble, help came immediately. When someone was hurt, others covered for them. When someone was scared, the voices of friends and teammates gave them courage. The real test came when the void plague changed tactics. Instead of spreading out, they concentrated all their creatures into one massive attack on the evacuation ships around the third planet. Millions of civilians would die in minutes if the swarm reached them. The Kthvar fleet was too far away to help in time. Only the small human fleet stood between the swarm and certain death for millions of innocents. We can't stop all of them, Pilot Jiho said over the communication channel. There are too many. Then we slow them down, Commander Hyuk said firmly. Every second we buy means more people get away. Sir, Gunner Hana said, if we do this, some of us won't make it out. The communication channel was quiet for a moment. Then Medic Soman's voice came through, calm and sure. Then some of us don't make it out, but the rest do, and those people down there live. Agreed, said Engineer Do-hyun. Agreed, said Jiho. Agreed, said Eunji. One by one, every human voice on the channel agreed. They would fight knowing some of them would die, because it meant others would live. Scout Blade Thok stared at the communication panel like it was an alien device he could not understand. They choose certain death for strangers. This is what we do, Dr. Minji said simply. The human ships dove into the swarm like arrows shot into a hurricane. They fought with desperate courage, each ship protecting the others even when it meant taking more damage themselves. When Jiho's ship was nearly destroyed, Hana flew directly between him and the attacking creatures, her own ship taking hits, meant for his. When Do-hyun's weapons failed, Yoonji shared her ammunition with him even though it left her own ship defenseless. And through it all, their voices stayed connected. Encouraging each other, sharing information, refusing to let anyone fight alone even in the middle of chaos and death. War Prime Vex watched the battle from his distant position, unable to reach the humans in time to help. What he saw should have been impossible. The small human ships were not just surviving against overwhelming odds, they were winning. Their coordination was so perfect it was like watching a single organism with many parts, each part willing to sacrifice itself for the whole. When the evacuation was complete and the last civilian ship escaped to safety, only half the human fleet was still flying, but they had saved millions of lives. As the Void Plague retreated to regroup, Scout Blade Thok finally found his voice. "How?" he whispered. "How did you achieve victory with such love?" Minji asked, seeing him struggle for words. Thok stared at her. Around them, the surviving human crew was already reaching out to help their wounded teammates, celebrating not their own survival, but the fact that others had lived through the battle. For the first time in his life, Scout Blade Thok began to wonder if everything he had been taught about strength and weakness might be wrong. War Prime Vex said nothing over the communication channel, but his yellow eyes never left the human ships as they worked together to rescue their damaged vessels and care for their wounded. Something inside his warrior heart was changing, and he did not know if he should fight it or let it happen. The Great Hall of the Kthvar War Council had never heard such an argument. For 3 hours, Scout Blade Thok had been presenting his observations about human combat behavior. The data was impossible to ignore, but the conclusions were shaking, the foundation of everything the Kthvar believed. 17 successful rescue operations during the battle, Thok said, his voice steady, despite the shocked faces around him. 0 abandonment of wounded teammates. Combat effectiveness increased by 43% when fighting in bonded pairs. War Prime Vex sat at the head of the council table, his scaled fingers drumming against the metal surface. Around him, other war leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These numbers made no sense according to everything they had been taught. "Impossible," growled War Prime Keth, an ancient warrior covered in battle scars. "Emotional attachment causes hesitation. Hesitation causes death. This is fundamental truth." "Then explain the results," Thok said, activating a holographic display. "Human survival rates exceed Kthvar performance by 37%. Their wounded recovery rates are 80% higher. Their combat coordination is unlike anything we have ever observed." Tech Claw Riss, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "The data supports Scout Blade Thok's observations. Human behavior patterns suggest evolution on a world requiring group cooperation for survival." War Prime Vex made his throat sound, but it was quieter than usual. "What do you propose, Thok? That we abandon thousands of years of warrior tradition? That we become weak like other species?" "I propose we consider that we might be wrong about what weakness means," Thok said quietly. The silence in the hall was complete. No Kthvar had ever spoken such words before. Meanwhile, on the human ship, Dr. Minji was having her own difficult conversation. Commander Hyuk had asked her to explain human bonding behavior to a group of young Kthvar warriors who had volunteered to learn more about their potential allies. "Your planet was dangerous," said one of the young Kthvar, whose name was Bladestrike Nex. "All Deathworlds create strong individual fighters. Why did your species develop differently?" Minji thought carefully about how to explain evolution to creatures who had never needed to understand it. "Earth wasn't just dangerous in the way your world was dangerous," she said. "Your world had big predators that could be fought alone if you were strong enough. Earth had everything. Diseases, weather that could kill you in minutes, predators that hunted in groups, poisonous plants, natural disasters." She activated her tablet showing images of Earth's wildlife. "Humans weren't the strongest species on our world. We weren't the fastest or the most dangerous, but we learned to work together better than any other species." The young Kthvar stared at pictures of lions hunting in prides, wolves working as packs, even ants building complex colonies. "Group hunting behaviors," Nex said slowly. "But you are describing animals, not intelligent species." "Humans learned from animals," Minji explained. "We saw that groups survived better than individuals, so we formed families, tribes, communities. And the groups that cared most about each other, that were willing to sacrifice for each other, those were the groups that lived through ice ages and plagues and disasters that killed everyone else. Engineer Do-hyun, who was helping with the explanation, added, "The humans who could love the most were the ones who survived to have children. Over thousands of generations, we became a species that gets stronger through emotional bonds instead of weaker." Blade Strike next tilted his head in that curious way Kthvar did when they were confused. But emotional bonds create vulnerability. If you care about someone, enemies can use that against you. Sometimes, Medic Soman said from where she was treating minor injuries from the recent battle. But they also create something your enemies can't fight against. "What is that?" another young Kthvar asked. "The willingness to die for something more important than yourself," Soman said simply. "When you fight only for your own survival, you'll run away when the odds get too bad. When you fight for people you love, you'll keep fighting even when you know you might die." The Kthvar warriors looked at each other uncertainly. This was a completely new way of thinking about strength and survival. Back in the council hall, the argument was getting more intense. War Prime Keith had stood up, his massive form towering over the table. "This is corruption of our pure warrior spirit," he declared. "Emotions make warriors weak. This is proven truth." "Is it?" Scout Blade Thok challenged. "Or is it just what we have always believed?" For a moment it looked like Keth might attack Thok for such disrespect. But War Prime Vex held up one clawed hand. "Speak, Thok. What do you truly think you observed?" Thok took a deep breath. "I think we have been wrong about everything. I think the humans found a different kind of strength, and it works better than ours." The hall erupted in angry voices. Several warriors started to stand, their claws extending, in threat displays. But Vex's command voice cut through the noise. "Silence." Everyone sat down immediately. "Thok," Vex said slowly, "you are suggesting that our entire way of life is incorrect." "I am suggesting," Thok said carefully, "that there might be more than one way to be strong." War Prime Vex was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Show me, sir. Show me these human bonding behaviors. I want to see for myself if they truly create strength or weakness." An hour later, Vex found himself in the human ship's common area, watching something that made no sense to him. Commander Hyuk and Dr. Minji were sitting together, not talking, just working on their separate tasks. But somehow they seemed more focused and calm than when they worked alone. "Explain this behavior," Vex demanded. "Which part?" Hyuk asked, looking up from his reports. "You accomplish your tasks more efficiently when the female is present, even though she does not assist with your work." "How?" Minji smiled. "Because I'm less worried when he's nearby. And when I'm less worried, I think more clearly." "But worry is useful," Vex said, confused. "Worry keeps warriors alert to danger." "Some worry, yes," Hyuk agreed. "But too much worry makes you freeze up or make bad decisions. When Minji is here, I worry less about things that don't matter, so I can focus on things that do matter." Vex stared at them like they were speaking a foreign language. The real moment of understanding came when young Blade Strike Nex approached Vex later that day. The young warrior looked nervous, which was unusual for any Kthvar. War Prime Nex said hesitantly, "I request permission to try an experiment." "What kind of experiment?" "I want to practice combat techniques with another warrior, not competing against each other, but working together, like the humans do." Every Kthvar in hearing distance stopped what they were doing. The idea was so radical it was almost heresy, but Vex found himself nodding. "Choose your partner. Report results." Over the next few days, something unprecedented began happening aboard the Kthvar ships. Small groups of young warriors started practicing together instead of alone. At first they were clumsy and inefficient. They had never learned to coordinate with others or trust anyone but themselves. But gradually something amazing began to happen. Warriors who practiced together started achieving better results than warriors practicing alone. More importantly, they started looking out for each other during practice, preventing injuries that would have been ignored before. Scout Blade Thok documented everything: combat effectiveness up by 20%, training injuries down by 60%, and something else, something harder to measure. The warriors working together seemed happier, more confident, more willing to take on difficult challenges. War Prime Vex watched these changes with growing amazement. Everything he had been taught said this should make his warriors weak. Instead, it was making them stronger. The breakthrough came when Blade Strike Nex approached him again. The young warrior was no longer nervous. He looked excited and determined. War Prime. Nex said, "I understand now what the humans call romance." Vex felt his scales bristle with alarm. "Explain." "It is not weakness," Nex said simply. "It is the ultimate form of tactical partnership. Two individuals who know each other so completely that they become more effective than the sum of their parts." For the first time in his long life, War Prime Vex had no immediate response. He stared at this young warrior who was talking about concepts that should have horrified him, but instead sounded almost reasonable. "The humans," Vex said slowly. "They fight for each other instead of just for themselves?" "Yes, sir. And because they fight for each other, they fight harder than anyone fighting just for themselves ever could." War Prime Vex was quiet for a long time. Around him, his ship continued its journey through space, carrying warriors who were slowly learning that strength might mean something completely different from what they had always believed. Change was coming to the Kthvar, whether they were ready for it or not. The warning came too late. The Void Plague had found the Kthvar homeworld, and they had brought everything they had. Massive swarm approaching from 3 directions. Communication Officer Yunji reported, her voice tight with fear. "This is 10 times larger than anything we've seen before." Commander Hyuk stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the enemy approach on the main screen. The space around the Kthvar homeworld was black with void plague creatures. They moved like a living storm cloud, blocking out the stars themselves. "Kthvar defense fleets are moving to intercept," Dr. Minji said, checking her sensors. "But Hyuk, there are too many of them." War Prime Vex appeared on the communication screen, his yellow eyes burning with determination. "Human Commander, you must leave immediately. This battle is already lost. Save your people while you can." "We're not going anywhere," Hyuk said firmly. "We're in this together." "Your small fleet cannot change the outcome," Vex replied. "The Kthvar will fight and die as warriors. That is our way." "Maybe," Hyuk said, "but maybe there's another way." The first wave of void plague creatures hit the Kthvar defense lines, like a hammer. The alien warriors fought with incredible bravery and skill, just as they always had. Each ship fought alone. Each pilot focused on individual survival and maximum enemy kills. But there were simply too many enemies. The Void Plague swarmed over individual Kthvar ships, overwhelming them through sheer numbers. When a ship was in trouble, nearby warriors continued their own battles instead of helping. It was the Kthvar way. Each fighter was responsible, only for himself. Scout Blade Thok watched the battle from War Prime Vex's ship, his heart sinking as ship after ship was destroyed. "We are losing," he said quietly. "Kthvar do not lose," Vex replied, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We fight until the end." "What if fighting until the end isn't enough?" Thok asked. "What if we need to fight differently?" Vex turned to look at his young officer. "What are you suggesting?" "The human methods. Fighting together instead of alone. Protecting each other instead of just ourselves." "Impossible," Vex said automatically, but as he watched another group of his warriors die because no one came to help them, the word sounded less certain. The battle was going badly for everyone. The human fleet was too small to make much difference against such a massive enemy. They fought in their coordinated way, supporting each other and working as teams, but they were being pushed back along with the Kthvar forces. Then Pilot Jiho's voice came over the communication channel. "Commander, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work." "Let's hear it," Hyuk said. What if we paired up with the Kthvar ships? One human pilot with one Kthvar warrior. We handle coordination and tactics. They provide the heavy firepower. Doctor? Minji looked up from her station. That could work, if they're willing to try. Hyuk opened a channel to War Prime Vex. Vex, we want to try something. Mixed human Kthvar teams. Are you willing to take the risk? Vex stared at the human commander for a long moment. Around him, the battle was being lost. His people were dying because they could not adapt to an enemy that fought differently from anything they had ever faced. What do you require? Vex asked. Trust, Hyuk said simply. The first mixed pairing was Engineer Do-hyun with a young Kthvar warrior named Strikeclaw Vorth. Neither of them knew what to expect. Do-hyun's smaller, faster ship flew alongside Vorth's powerful battlecruiser as they approached a group of void-plagued creatures. Stay close, Do-hyun said over the communication link. I'll guide us through their formation. You hit them with everything you've got. You would trust me to protect your smaller ship? Vorth asked, surprised. That's the whole point, Do-hyun said. We protect each other. What happened next amazed everyone watching. Do-hyun's ship danced through the enemy formation like a bird, drawing the creatures' attention while avoiding their attacks. At exactly the right moments, Vorth's heavy weapons tore through the confused enemies. The Kthvar warrior found himself moving to protect the human ship without even thinking about it. Efficient, Vorth said in wonder. More efficient than fighting alone. Much more, Do-hyun agreed. The success of the first pairing encouraged others. Medic Somin teamed up with Blade Strike Nex, her medical knowledge helping him stay in the fight longer, while his combat skills protected her support ship. Gunner Hana worked with a veteran Kthvar called Iron Scale Dex, their combined firepower devastating enemy formations. But the real test came when Scout Blade Thok approached War Prime Vex with an impossible request. I want to partner with Commander Hyuk, Thok said. Vex stared at his young officer. You want to fight alongside the human leader? Yes, sir. I want to learn what they call trust. After a moment that felt like an eternity, Vex nodded. Commander Hyuk and Scout Blade Thok flew into battle together and something extraordinary happened. Hyuk's strategic thinking combined with Thok's warrior instincts created something greater than either could achieve alone. When Thok's ship was damaged, Hyuk immediately moved to shield him. When Hyuk's weapons overheated, Thok positioned his ship to cover the humans' vulnerable moments. But more than that, they began to communicate in a way that amazed both of them. Hyuk could sense when Thok was about to make a move and support him instantly. Thok could feel when Hyuk needed help and respond without being asked. This is what you call trust, Thok said over their private communication channel. This is what we call partnership, Hyuk replied. The change in the battle was dramatic. The human Kthvar teams were not just surviving, they were winning. Their combined tactics were confusing the Void Plague, which had evolved to fight against individual opponents, not coordinated pairs. War Prime Vex watched the battle turn in their favor and finally understood what he had been seeing all along. The humans had not survived their death world by being individually strong. They had survived by being collectively unstoppable. The climactic moment came when the Void Plague launched one final desperate attack on the planet's surface. Millions of creatures swarmed down toward the cities where billions of Kthvar civilians lived. All ships, this is it, Commander Hyuk announced over the fleet communication channel. If we don't stop them here, it's over for everyone. Understood, human commander, War Prime Vex replied. Kthvar fleet is ready to follow your lead. It was the first time in Kthvar history that a warrior leader had offered to follow someone else's commands. But as Vex spoke those words, he felt not shame but relief. He was not alone anymore. The combined fleet dove toward the planet's surface, human and Kthvar ships fighting side by side. But this time they fought as true partners. When Communication Officer Yunji's ship was overwhelmed, 3 Kthvar warriors immediately came to her aid. When a group of Kthvar fighters was trapped, Pilot Jiho and Medic Somin flew directly into danger to rescue them. The battle was won not by individual heroics, but by the simple act of everyone refusing to let anyone fight alone. As the last, Void Plague creatures retreated into space, defeated and broken, Scout Blade Thok found himself floating in space beside Commander Hyuk's damaged ship. Both their vessels were barely functional, but they had survived. "Thok," Hyuk said over the communication channel, "are you okay?" The simple question, one warrior asking about another's welfare, struck Thok like a physical blow. No Kthvar had ever asked him such a thing before. "I am functional," Thok replied, then paused. "Hyuk, I think I understand now what your species calls caring." "Yeah?" Hyuk said, and Thok could hear the smile in his voice. "It is not weakness," Thok said, with certainty. "It is the strongest force in the universe." 6 months later, the changes on the Kthvar homeworld were impossible to miss. Warriors who had once fought only for individual glory now worked in partnerships. The old tradition of leaving the wounded to heal alone had been replaced by teams that looked after each other. Most surprisingly of all, the first Kthvar wedding in recorded history was about to take place. Scout Blade Thok, now promoted to War Prime Thok, had asked Communication Officer Unji to be his partner not just in battle, but in life. She had said yes. The ceremony was attended by both species, all of them gathered to celebrate something that had once been incomprehensible to the Kthvar. War Prime Vex stood beside Commander Hyuk and Dr. Minji, watching the young couple exchange vows of mutual protection and eternal partnership. "Your species has changed us completely," Vex said, quietly to Hyuk. "No," Hyuk replied, watching Thok and Yunji with obvious happiness. "Your species changed yourselves. We just showed you it was possible." "The Deathworlders call it romance," Vex said, remembering his first confused observations of human behavior. "Yes," Dr. Minji said, taking Hyuk's hand in hers. "We call it the most powerful force in the galaxy." War Prime Vex watched the ceremony and thought about how much had changed. His people had learned that strength could come from vulnerability, that trust could be a weapon more powerful than any technology, and that fighting for others was the greatest victory any warrior could achieve. The Kthvar were no longer the same species that had first encountered the strange humans with their incomprehensible emotions. They had become something new, warriors who understood that the greatest battles were won not by those who fought alone, but by those who refused to let anyone fight alone. And in the vast darkness of space,